A local police football ban in the UK has caused a nationwide political debate and an international sporting scandal. So what is going on?
This decision was not made in a vacuum. It's set against the backdrop of rising anti-Semitism here and across the world, and an attack on a synagogue in Manchester. It has a real-world impact on a community who already feel excluded and afraid.
But those who are not welcome in Aston are hooligans that have a long history of violence and vile racism. Chants like F the Arab, we will rape their daughters, that there are no schools in Gaza because there are no children left in Gaza. It's these hooligans that are not welcome.
Maccabi Tel Aviv's racist fan hooliganism cannot be separated from Israeli militarism. Many of these fans are active or former soldiers who have taken part in Israel's genocide in Gaza. They should be investigated for war crimes the moment they set foot onto British soil, not welcomed into our stadiums.
The debate began last Thursday when the UK's West Midlands police announced a ban on Maccabi Tel Aviv fans attending an upcoming match against Aston Villa in Birmingham.
Referencing violent clashes and hate crime offences during a match in Amsterdam last year, the police said the measure aimed to mitigate risks to public safety.
In November, a Maccabi Tel Aviv game against Ajax Amsterdam led to scenes of violence on the streets. Israeli football fans marched through Amsterdam, defacing Palestine flags and chanting racist slogans. You heard a few of them in that clip. Locals responded with violent and at times antisemitic attacks. 5 people were hospitalised and 62 people were arrested. But after Birmingham Council and police announced a similar ban, the UK government immediately pushed back.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer said shortly afterward that it was the wrong decision, saying the UK will not tolerate anti-Semitism on our streets. Leaders across UK political parties joined Labour in condemning the ban, calling it anti-Semitic and divisive.
But public opinion in the UK backed the police decision, with 42% of people saying they supported the ban, over 28% who opposed it. Also supporting the ban was independent MP Ayoub Khan, whose constituency is home to the Villa Park Stadium.
Khan condemned other politicians for making this a matter of banning Jews, tweeting, "It was never about religion, but everything to do about hooligans."
As debate continues in the UK, another match has been disrupted by clashes in Israel. A local derby between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Hapoel Tel Aviv in Israel was cancelled after police reported violent riots.
Maccabi has distanced itself from these clashes, which appear to have primarily taken place between local police and Hapoel Tel Aviv fans.
The UK government pledged to find additional security resources to enable police in Birmingham to lift the ban on Maccabi fans.
But on Monday, Maccabi Tel Aviv said that regardless of whether the UK overturned the ban, it would not sell tickets to its fans.
The club said, quote, "The well-being and safety of our fans is paramount," accusing various entrenched groups of seeking to malign the Maccabi fan base and exploiting isolated incidents for their own political ends.
The club added that they were concerned about the intervention of divisive figures who do not represent the club's values. This follows far-right British activist Tommy Robinson urging his followers to protest what he called Islamist activists at the game itself.
Today on MEE Live, Tamara and I are speaking to 3 different guests: Birmingham MP Ayoub Khan, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, and rights researcher Nick McGeehan, to unpack why the ban is in place and why it has caused so much political chaos.
Someone who has been a strong advocate, not just for banning Maccabi fans from attending the game, but for actually cancelling the match itself, is the MP for Birmingham Perry Barr, Mr. Ayoub Khan. Mr. Khan has welcomed the recent decision to ban fans from attending, insisting that what he calls racist and violent hooligans have no place in the country. Despite receiving considerable backlash for his stance, Mr. Khan has doubled down on it. He speaks to us now to explain why he supported the decision and what the reaction from the UK public has been like. Mr. Khan, thank you so much for speaking to MEE Live.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been a strong advocate of banning Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending and also of cancelling the match. What kind of public reaction have you faced for that stance?
Been positive as well as negative. It's been negative because the whole debate has been weaponized about religion. It's got nothing to do with religion. My position has been very clear from the outset. There's a moral argument and there's a safety argument, and those are two distinct arguments that I have. I am saying that there needs to be consistency. We can ban Russian teams from participating in competitions because of the atrocities that are happening in Ukraine. And where we have a genocide taking place in Gaza, the same principles should apply. And that's my moral argument. The second argument is just like Maccabi Football Club, they are setting out in their statement the well-being and safety of their fans. I have a responsibility to my constituents. And if my constituents feel unsafe with what they have witnessed take place, not just in Amsterdam, but more recently, what took place in Tel Aviv, then I have an obligation to listen to their views and to raise those views. Ultimately, the decision was made by West Midlands Police and the Safety Advisory Group. And I support my Chief Constable here in the West Midlands. And it's sad and possibly disgraceful that politicians are trying to get involved in operational matters. That shouldn't happen.
As you said, these concerns of safety, of security are first and foremost for you, as well as for your constituents and fans of Maccabi Tel Aviv themselves. How do you feel when you hear certain commentators saying kind of Birmingham can't be a no-go area for Jews? I think Trevor Phillips called it on Sky News, when they suggest that Birmingham is unsafe for Maccabi fans, perhaps due to interfaith, intercommunal tensions, suggesting that the city is not welcoming to fans of football clubs.
It's dangerous coming from people that are prominent news anchors, and we've had, for example, Robert Jenrick, and the video not so long ago that was posted with a recording where he was making reference to integration. He was in the Aston ward despite it being called Handsworth. Where he said there was a lack of integration because he didn't see any white faces. I think this kind of rhetoric, this nonsense that you are having from senior political figures, as well as senior journalists and news anchors, is pushing more division than unity. And it's a shame that that's the type of politics and that's the type of world we're living in at present.
And speaking of that division and kind of what you see as dangerous rhetoric, you yourself have received significant backlash, accusations of anti-Semitism, but also a bit more identity-focused attacks on you personally. I might just ask, how has the impact been on you? And do you feel that perhaps you are receiving criticism that outstrips even some of your colleagues in Parliament, other independent MPs who have agreed with your stance?
So I've been the focal point of attention, and understandably, it's my constituency, which is home to the Aston Villa Football Club. The hate and disgusting and vile messaging, emails that I've received have had a serious impact on the family as opposed to me as an individual. But that's because I tend not to look at many messages. But your children will ultimately go onto social media and they'll see what people are saying. And of course, it comes with the job. It comes with responsibility. Nobody should have to face the vile and disingenuous comments. But it's all been propagated by senior politicians that have weaponized religion and brought religion into it. It's not an honest debate by any stretch of the imagination. We saw it in Parliament yesterday, where when you are speaking facts and you're making sense, you are aligning with the vast majority of the public. I mean, that poll that you've identified, I suspect if that poll was conducted again today, you would probably get the 30%, which were unsure, uncertain, rally behind the 42%. So you'd be getting 3/4 of the British population polled in support of a ban. But I say politics is now more about rhetoric. It's not about sound evidence. And for example, Lisa said in Parliament yesterday, and I picked up on an article in the CNN where someone was saying that it was the Maccabi fans that were in danger, and I'm amazed and perplexed as to why and how someone can make that assessment when we haven't been given that information. We haven't given the intelligence which the police and the safety advisory group would have had put before it. And so if we haven't had that information, how can you make that determination?
And just lastly, you mentioned again, there's a lot of dangerous rhetoric going around from senior politicians to senior media figures. What would you want people to know who are looking at this situation, who are confused and unsure of what to believe between football hooligans or, anti-Semitism and some of those claims? What would you wish to tell people who don't know whom to trust or which claims to believe?
I would advance and advocate two distinct arguments. The very first argument is a principled argument. It's based on consistency. It's a fairly straightforward argument to understand. All I'm saying is that where there are human rights violations, international competitions have been prevented from those nations or those countries from participating within. So I use Russia as an example because it's running in parallel with what we're seeing taking place in Gaza. So if you have leaders that say you have committed human rights violations and therefore your nation cannot participate in any international competitions, and we all stand by that decision, well, that must be then consistently applied. You cannot simply select who that condition must apply to. It doesn't mean just because you are considered an ally that you are allowed to commit human rights violations, in this case of Israel genocide, and then decide, well, we're going to allow you to normalize relationships on an international footing. That doesn't sit well, it's not consistent, and it's not the moral thing to do. So that argument is fairly straightforward, and I think most of the public will understand that argument. If it applies to one, why can it not apply to another? We did it against South Africa. In fact, it was under the Thatcher government. And what's shocking is that under a Labour government, someone who professes to be in his old job a humanitarian barrister, he would understand readily what I'm setting out. And then you've got the second argument, one which is about safety. We have trust and responsible, experienced police officers in the West Midlands Police. We have independent, impartial board of experts on the safety advisory group, which have immense experience. We've got a number of football clubs within the West Midlands region, so they've dealt with hooligans and people that can cause havoc in a community. So they're experienced people. If they are saying that this event is high risk and they cannot issue a safety certificate, an operational decision which lies firmly with them, we should be supporting the expertise of those individuals and that board. We should not be bullying them, we should not be blackmailing them, and we should not be politicizing this debate. It's nothing to do with religion, but everything to do with a nation that's responsible for a genocide and a nation that has clearly violated human rights.
And just to follow up on that, you mentioned you have immense trust in the police and the decisions made by the police. It seems Prime Minister Keir Starmer came out against their decision. Were you surprised by his criticism of the police's decision and by his attempts to overturn the ban and to, and his comments that he was deeply saddened by the decision?
Well, it's shameful that and outrageous that a prime minister could label the chief constable of West Midlands Police and the safety advisory group as anti-Semitic, because that is what he has done. He has weaponized and brought religion into it. It's got nothing to do with religion. And I think to myself, could you imagine if that chief constable was a Muslim, what he would have felt like? And so, in my view, it's a disgrace for a prime minister and any political leader who has decided to weaponize, and we've had it across four political parties, the leaders of all four political parties here in Parliament, the government, the Tories, Lib Dems and Reform have undermined the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, undermined the Safety Advisory Group, and I think that is disgraceful, quite frankly.
And do you think Prime Minister Starmer's adoption of that rhetoric, seeming to, dovetail with some of the rhetoric we've heard from the Conservatives, from even Reform about this issue, do you think it signals a perhaps rightward or more culture war shift in the country, given your perspective as an independent MP, a non-white independent MP? Do you fear that it suggests the country is moving in a political direction which is increasingly right-wing and increasingly oriented around issues of culture or identity or ethnic and religious belonging, so to speak?
Yeah, well, we've seen more and more of that being played out. I mean, what it's done is added fuel to that particular movement. We had a massive protest here in London not so long ago, headed by Tommy Robinson, where vile racist comments were being made from a platform. Now, the audience, a lot of them were racist, and their bigoted views were captured by, I think it's Nico, who went undercover. But equally, there were many people there that I believe were there out of frustration because the cost of living, not being able to put 3 square meals on their family table, not being able to go on holiday, their annual holiday, not to be in a position where they can pay their monthly utility bills. And rather than dealing with that inequality, what we are getting is that community, that working class community, being pushed to the right, and it's based on a cultural war against migrants. In this case, by Tommy Robinson and the likes of Nigel Farage and others, which are trying to blame, the unauthorized migration, the cost of unauthorized migration. So there's a lot of fuel which is being poured into our society and what we want to do. And I'm glad that YouGov poll was conducted, because what it shows is that we have a significant fair-minded observers which are able to decipher and trawl through the rhetoric and come out with a sound conclusion.
And as you mentioned, you see economic issues at the heart of these greater divides. I wonder then, if that is at the base of these frustrations and this polarization that we're now seeing in protests like the ones you've mentioned, what do you see as the best way to respond to these cultural inflection points, like the ban on Maccabi Tel Aviv and others, and even issues with the British flag displays as well, so as not to give ammunition, as it were, to the more polemical campaigns of Reform, Nigel Farage and similar actors?
Fortunately, we ought to be as elected representatives, responsible, careful, measured in our discussions, in advancing our viewpoints. I think politicians have a responsibility to recognise where we are seeing a shift in society. We need to be able to address that. What we are not seeing is that responsibility. What we are seeing is it's almost shadow chasing. It's if you have a right-wing movement, how right can we get? I mean, let's not forget, Keir Starmer's tweet followed Kemi Badenoch's assertion
that this was disgraceful. This was something that would impact a religious group, and then Keir Starmer, instead of playing down that rhetoric, instead of supporting the Chief Constable and the Safety Advisory Group, instead of sitting down with the Chief Constable and the Safety Advisory Group just to understand why that decision was made, he failed to do any of those things and decided to just use the word anti-Semitism and weaponize that particular word. So it is a very complex scenario that we're living through in this country, but I genuinely believe that we have so many people out there which are have their moral compass in the right place, and what we want to do is wake up the silent majority. Social media can be an echo chamber, but it can be a very powerful tool. And I genuinely believe that there are so many people that are disgusted by what they hear and what they see, but just want to stay out of it. And I think we need to be bold, and we need to be brave, and we need to speak up.
That is certainly an inspiring message and a more positive note to end on. Independent MP for Birmingham, Perry Barr, Ayoub Khan, thank you so much for speaking to Middle East Eye, and we're wishing you and your family safety and well-being during these very polarized times. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have my co-host Matilda speaking about those political divisions and some of the rhetoric we've heard across the British political spectrum. Matilda will be speaking to independent MP and former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn about how this issue has been perceived across UK Parliament.
Thank you, Tamara. I believe we have Corbyn ready on the line. Am I correct? Jeremy, do I have you yet?
Indeed, I've just arrived. I was in the chamber listening to the debate on sentencing.
Well, thank you for coming here as soon as you can. I'll fill you in on the interview we just had. We just spoke to Ayoub Khan, a fellow independent...
I caught the last part of Ayoub Khan's interview, but only the last couple of minutes.
What you missed then was he was telling us before that actually this has been a very, very difficult time, not just for him, but for his family, in response to his speaking out in support of the police ban in his local constituency. He has been targeted by very severe rhetoric and threats to his safety, to his family's safety. I just wondered whether you had anything to say about that.
Yes, I was a very good friend of mine, and I have huge admiration and support for him and what he's doing and trying to do for his community. I was also defending him today in the chamber in the House of Commons, because yesterday the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, responded to my question about the banning of Maccabi supporters, in which I said that we should separate the issue of the behaviour of a particular cohort of football fans from the need to make sure that our streets are always safe for people of all faiths, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, any faith, and that that should be the way we approach things. She agreed with my statement on the latter part, disagreed with what I'd said about Maccabi supporters, and then said I should educate my colleagues, referring to Ayoub and others who were sitting next to me at the time, because she said she hadn't heard this from them in recent weeks. So I'm extremely angry about this, because Ayoub is representing his community. He's also representing the wider interests of the people of Birmingham, and he wants there to be safety, and that's why he supports the decision made by the West Midlands Police with the support of the appropriate local commissioner as well as the local authority. And I think the government's interference in this is more than a little odd, because normally government ministers and local authority leaders and so on keep away from commenting on operational policing matters. They leave that to the police and then raise the policy issues afterwards or separately. And this time the Prime Minister seems to have waded into this with his own views on it all. let's be clear, nobody is banning anybody because of their religious belief. Nobody is banning anybody because of their ethnicity. What has happened is they've said it is not safe to have this group of supporters from Maccabi travelling to Birmingham for that particular match. But apparently the club, Maccabi Tel Aviv, have now said they're not going to take up any of their ticket allocation anyway, so there'll be nobody coming.
Could you then maybe shine any light on why you think the government has done this? I mean, you are an independent MP, but you were formerly head of the Labour Party. And as you point out, this is an unusual decision by the government to weigh in on a local council, local police decision. It's also at odds with the views of the British public. YouGov polling showed that sort of across the political divide, British public supported the decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending. What do you think is the thought process?
It does happen occasionally with football matches across Europe. It's not very often, but it does happen that particular groups of supporters are prevented from travelling or prevented from coming to a match because of their past form. I do remember a time when English clubs were all banned from Europe because of fan behaviour on away matches. And more recently, fans from Warsaw were prevented from travelling to Aston Villa to play a match because of the perceptions of their behaviour and what would happen. So it does happen, and those decisions are made on the basis of police advice. But the intervention of the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State on the question of the arrival or potential arrival of Maccabi supporters has then got conflated into the idea that Jewish supporters are not welcome. And I noticed that Ed Miliband then joined in the debate on Sunday on television, in which he said there was a ban on Jewish supporters going to the Aston Villa game. Absolutely not true. Let's be correct about this. It was Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters who were banned from attending the match because of their behaviour and the perceptions of their threat to public order. It was nothing to do with people's faith or anything else. And actually, it is contrary even to the government's support for the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which they said it is wrong to conflate Israel with Judaism.
But do you think that,
they've done exactly that?
Do you not think maybe it's worth considering that risk? I know the Ed Miliband clip you're talking about. I'd say actually it was very pointed from Sky News' Trevor Phillips, who directly said, "Is this now a no-go area for Jews?" But this rhetoric is coming from the government. Lisa Nandy emphasised again and again that, she says this isn't happening in a vacuum. Now, whether or not, it's right to conflate anti-Semitism, well, it's clearly not right, but whether or not it's accurate, this conflation of anti-Semitism and a criticism of the Tel Aviv Maccabi football fans, is it not right to acknowledge that this is set against a backdrop of rising anti-Semitism? This is quoting Lisa Nandy. She cited the attack on a synagogue in Manchester. Do you think that there is a risk that this decision could actually play into this and could make life more difficult for the Jewish community in Birmingham? Or do you think, well, tell me what you think about that, because it's clearly a concern.
There are rising levels of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in our society. Mosques routinely receive threats, sometimes demonstrations outside them, sometimes the far right demonstrating outside them. We had the abominable and appalling attack on people in the synagogue in Manchester, which resulted in deaths. That is, of course, abominable and appalling and has to be criticised, called out and opposed, and obviously measures to make sure that synagogues are secure, mosques are secure, temples, churches and so on are very, very important. But I do think that conflating the behavior of one group of football supporters from one club in Israel with anti-Semitism is actually playing into the hands of anti-Semites within our society. And I think the government could and should have done a lot better on this. And I think you were referring earlier to public opinion on this, and the government is actually behind the curve on this. A lot of the public fully understand that there's a big difference between stopping somebody coming who you believe is going to cause problems and what would be an utterly racist thing to do, which would be to ban people on the basis of their ethnicity or their faith.
There's one more thing I'd love to get your view on, Jeremy, before we lose you, which is someone else has weighed into this political discussion, and that is Tommy Robinson, an extremist far-right figure here in the UK, who called on his supporters to take to the streets and protest the ban on Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans. And the Maccabi Tel Aviv team has said that actually this is something they actively want to dissociate from, and they see that as increasing the threat to their fans in the UK. This is a debate that, from my perspective, consistently plays into far-right politicians, far-right pundits. In Amsterdam, when there was violence when Maccabi Tel Aviv fans attended the match. The far-right leader, Geert Wilders, used the event and the media coverage and the political debate as a basis to threaten stripping Dutch Moroccans of citizenship. You know, Tommy Robinson is known for incredibly Islamophobic positions. How do you feel this topic is playing into the rise of the far-right in the UK and elsewhere?
It is absolutely playing into the hands of the far right, and Tommy Robinson is busy exploiting that, and all he does is whips up utterly racist stuff against people in our country who are just trying to lead their normal lives and following their particular faith. I don't think Tommy Robinson has anything useful to say or help anybody on this subject, and what we should be doing is recognising the decision made by West Midlands Police after a great deal of thought and a great deal of examination of all the evidence, and they came to that conclusion. And it wasn't just the police alone. There was the local advisory committee and there was the local authority involved, and they took an estimate of what they believed would happen. And I would also like to know, and I suspect they did, whether or not the West Midlands Police also consulted the police in Tel Aviv, who have a lot of problems with Maccabi supporters, as they did a match the other night when there was the match apparently had to be abandoned because the behaviour of fans from both sides, one team of which was Maccabi.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Now, while political debate in the UK has centred on these questions of religion and intolerance, West Midlands Police's statement focused on the issue of public safety.
They cited current intelligence and previous incidents, specifically violence and hate crimes during Maccabi Tel Aviv's 2024 UEFA match against Ajax Amsterdam on the 7th of November last year.
Initial headlines at the time echoed statements by Israeli and European politicians which condemned anti-Semitism on the streets of Amsterdam. But Middle East Eye had been reporting days earlier on local hooliganism by the Maccabi fans.
In those days prior to the night of the game, which saw incidents of extreme anti-Semitism, Israeli football fans had marched through the streets of Amsterdam, attacking people they perceived to be Arab or Muslim. They tore down and set fire to Palestinian flags and chanted hate speech such as, "Why is school out in Gaza? Because there are no children left there."
Following events in November, Amsterdam City Council banned Maccabi Tel Aviv from the capital, particularly after outcry from local residents. We spoke to one of these residents who felt local authorities had not done enough.
Everything points to the fact that we as citizens of Amsterdam have been abandoned by our mayor, who seems more concerned with the Maccabi hooligans who chanted slogans that violated our constitution, threatened the citizens of our city, and destroyed their personal belongings. Furthermore, the Israeli hooligans smashed taxi windows, vandalized cars, spat at the taxi drivers, and verbally abused them. It's unacceptable that we as Dutch citizens are being deprived of our rights in exchange for favoring Israel riots. There is no explanation that could justify this scandalous betrayal.
That was one of Amsterdam's local residents saying that he and others in the city had felt abandoned by local authorities. But similar international bans followed last month. Ajax fans were blocked by Marseille on grounds of public safety and security in France, and the prefecture of Naples banned Eintracht Frankfurt fans from attending a match against Napoli.
In the UK government's condemnation of the ban, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy stated, "It is the first time since the early 2000s in this country that a decision has been taken to ban entirely away fans from attending a game."
Unfortunately, though, that is not the case. In November 2023, Aston Villa banned supporters of the Polish club Legia Warsaw from a game in response to violence from fans of the club.
Joining us now to talk more about the grounds for such bans is Nick McGeehan, co-director of Fair Square, an advocacy group about rights and sports. Nick, welcome to MEE Live.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, you argue that this is not really a decision that West Midlands Police should have had to take at all. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, after the violence, the unrest in Amsterdam, which was well documented by media from around the world, we wrote to UEFA because there was UEFA has a provision in its statutes which insists that all member associations have a policy to eradicate racism among their supporter bases, and we asked UEFA if they were planning to investigate this matter, because obviously there was a lot of racism clearly from the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, and there was also a lot of violence that they were subjected to both before and particularly after the match. So we requested this of UEFA, and UEFA didn't respond. And it's subsequently become clear that there is, in fact, it was clear long before the match, that Israeli football is a systematic problem of pervasive and serious racial violence and racism among the supporter base. And this is grounds for UEFA to take action against the Israel Football Association. Now, sports governing bodies, football governing bodies have got multiple grounds to sanction, to suspend or expel the Israel Football Association. But in the case of Israeli football supporters, the racism that they display is very clear grounds for UEFA to act. So, to be honest, had UEFA fulfilled its responsibilities and insisted that the IFA have a policy in place, then we wouldn't have this situation where the responsibility is being foisted onto West Midlands Police to act.
Right, okay, so you agree that the fans should be banned, but you think this ban should have been implemented by UEFA. Is there a precedent for this, or have we seen UEFA ban teams or ban fans on their own grounds of outruling racism in the past?
So often you'd see fans, teams have to play behind closed doors, for example. The most recent example of fans being banned from European competition is actually Russian teams. Russian teams were banned from competition after the invasion of Ukraine. Now UEFA, in that case, when that case was taken to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, they argued that ban was based on public safety, that they couldn't guarantee the safety of players and officials. Now, when it comes to Israel, UEFA prefers to take a hands-off approach, and doesn't want to appear to impose any sort of obligations on them, despite the very obvious and serious racist behaviour that you see from various groups of fan groups. It's not just Maccabi Tel Aviv. In fact, the most racist group of fans in Israel are the supporters of Beitar Jerusalem, who have, in fact, got very close links to Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party.
So you would argue that Israeli football fans have a particular problem of racism, a particular cultural problem that is specific to Israeli football. Is that correct? And if so, why do you think that is, or where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I think there is a particular problem in Israeli football. I mean, there's a lot of this documented, and a lot of the documentation is done by Israeli football journalists. The problem, the biggest problem is with Beitar Jerusalem, who for a very long time have, been a sort of a focal point for the type of ethno-nationalism that you unfortunately see in segments of Israeli society. As I said, Benjamin Netanyahu has long been a supporter of Beitar, and many Likud politicians, many right-wing politicians have gone to that stadium, Teddy Stadium in Jerusalem, to sort of demonstrate their support for Beitar, and to sort of cultivate their image as, pretty far-right politicians. So it's not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. It does sadly appear to have worsened since the violence, the genocide in Gaza. Israeli football supporters seem to have, the rhetoric, the chants, seem to have become more widespread, according to some reports from Israeli NGOs that document this type of stuff. And I think what you saw in Amsterdam was how this unchecked racism sort of spilled out into the streets of Europe. And again, I think that provides a pretty reasonable and decent argument and evidence for the West Midlands Police and the City Council to say that they don't want that sort of thing in Birmingham.
And West Midlands Police, they've been fairly vague, although they did directly reference the events in Amsterdam as a reason for their safety concerns. I think probably many people listening, or someone who doesn't even know particularly that much about football, understands already that racism is a persistent problem among various football fans, regardless of nationality. I know that that's certainly true here in the UK, but that doesn't mean that it's true for all football fans. Is it fair to issue a blanket ban on Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans because of the awful behaviour of some of them? Or is a blanket ban of any kind like that not tantamount to discrimination?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why I think the ban is pretty reasonable. In the first place, the people of Birmingham have the right to live in peace and safety and not to be subject to racial abuse and racial violence, right? Now, their right to that peace and security supersedes and takes priority over the right of any football supporters to go and watch a football match. So that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing to say is that sport is incredibly culturally and politically important. And racism in sport is deeply nefarious and can cause very serious problems. And if you're going to strip that out from sport, and if you're going to use sport as a tool for sort of social progress, then obviously some people have to pay the price for that. If you go back to apartheid-era South Africa, for example, now there would be plenty of South Africans who loved sport, who loved rugby, who loved soccer, who loved athletics, and who would be very keen to see their team participate in international sporting competition. They couldn't, and they couldn't because the sport was used as a tool to essentially get rid of that apartheid system and bring the country back into the fold. So yes, it's disappointing for these people who can't go and see their team, but the broader goals and the broader aims of this type of action are far more important than somebody being able to watch a game or somebody being able to even participate in the game.
Yeah. So it sounds like for you, this isn't just about the security issues cited by the police. This is about enforcing a certain culture in sports and enforcing a certain culture with sports. So that brings us on to the wider question that some people are asking here, although it is different to the question that has been asked or raised by the police and the local council. And that is the question of boycotting Israeli teams from sports. So just as we wrap this show, would you share with us your thoughts on that debate as just a sort of leaving food for thought?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I think when we talk about sport, we have to be conscious of what it can and what it cannot achieve. There are no clear rules in the statutes that govern bodies like FIFA and UEFA for different violations of international law. There's nothing in there about genocide. There's nothing in there about the crime of aggression. However, there are things in there about racism, systematic racism, and there are things in there that pertain to the issue of illegal settlements. You are not allowed to play matches in the territory of another club. So the moral imperative for a boycott of Israeli clubs or Israeli sports and Israeli football is clearly Gaza. It is very, very obvious that people would try and use that as a tool to stop what's happening there and to demonstrate and to show Israeli society that we do not accept what is happening and they cannot participate in our sports until they change that situation. That's the moral reason for it, but the statutory reason, the rules-based reason, can be found very clearly in the statutes. That's what we propose. That's what we advocate, and And that's what we've been saying to UEFA and FIFA. If you look at your rules, then it's pretty clear that you have to suspend the Israel Football Association. Now, unfortunately, they don't want to do that. They are organisations that seem to think of themselves as political actors rather than rules-bound sporting administrators, which is why we're in the situation we're still in today.
Nick McGeehan, co-director of Fair Square, thank you so much for joining us on MEE Live.